Okay, this video, we are going to talk about two approaches for appraisals based on chapter 7 of the textbook. So this chapter talks about two approaches, sales comparison approach and the cost approach. In chapter 8, we will cover the income approach. Okay, so the first slide is talking about like when are appraisal needed. I may possibly ask some conceptual questions based on those concepts. But overall, we need appraisal because just like stocks, sometimes we really need to know the valuation of a property. But because real estates are heterogeneous, they're different, and they're not being acquired, sold, or purchased as often. So sometimes we really have to do a market estimation based on similar sales or based on the cost of construction, or based on the potential income that generated by the project. Okay, so we have three very important value concepts. The most important thing is market value. Oopsie. Okay, so three very important value concepts. The market value is the most probable selling price, assuming normal sale condition. That means whenever we say remember this is a jargon you need to know. Arm's length transaction means regular consumption, like regular transactions without any special circumstances. For example, if I'm making a sale to a stranger, given the normal market condition, given my regular financing condition, then is an arm's length transaction. The non-arm's length transaction probably means if a father is trying to sell a property for a discount to his son, or a person is not able to afford the mortgage, trying to make a short sale. Those kind of transactions will probably reduce the transaction price or deviating the transaction value to the market value. So write it down in your notebook. The market value is assuming normal sales condition, arm's length transaction. Investment value is a really value to a particular individual, typically an investor. However, write it down. Whenever you're looking at the same property, different investors may have different valuation. Because different investors have different cost of financing, different development plan, or different resources, different market abilities. They may be able to generate different cash flow for the same piece of land. Also, lastly, the transaction price is really the price paid for a specific property by the buyer. That's the final recorded transaction price we see after a business deal, a real estate deal has been closed. Okay, so who wants to use market appraisal? Property buyers, before you purchase a property, you kind of want to hire a professionals to kind of give you an estimation of how much the property is worth. I know in today's market, there's Zillow, there's Redfin that give you a market estimate. However, those are very generic estimations, may not be accurate. And also, the sellers want to know, because before you sell a house, you kind of want to know how much I want to ask for the house. In that scenario, you can hire appraisers. The appraiser can inspect your house and give you a suggested valuation based on their inspection. So corporate acquisition or mergers, these solutions, this apply to businesses. For example, if I'm a company, let's say Nokia. One day, Nokia is acquired by another company, and the other company wants to know how much to pay to Nokia. Well, Nokia says, well, in addition to the technologies or the business case, the business reputation we also have real estate properties under the corporation name. So the potential buyers needs to pay for the fair value for the real estate property, but they cannot sell the property before the merger and acquisition. So what they do is they will hire appraisers to estimate the worth or the valuation of the real estate property. Courts, for example, in divorce courts or in bankruptcy courts, typically the asset of the person being, in the court needs to be divided among different parties, but the person cannot sell the property immediately. What they can do is the court may hire an appraiser, say, hey, how much is a person's house worth? Then they can have an estimated value of the person's asset equity based on the valuation. Okay, so for court, divorce, eminent domain, there are takings we talked about, and settlement estates or bankruptcy. And also, very importantly, this is a very big piece. Whenever you're getting a mortgage, the bank, your mortgage lender require you to have an appraisal. Okay, so on the midterm, I may ask you, why do people need appraisal? Those are all possible choices. Okay. So this is a review of chapter 1. We're really talking about why our property is unique, why we have to do appraisal for each individual property. Okay. So this is exhibit 7, chapter 7, number 1. This really talks about how to conduct an appraisal report. So first, you really need to identify the appraisal problems, and then you determine the required scope of work. You collect data. The data may be the market area data, right? The local data, the macroeconomic data, the market condition. Did the Fed increase the interest rates? How does the unemployment look nationwide or locally? And then we look at the specific sites, the size of the lots, the building, the condition, number of bedroom, bathrooms. And then you have to look for a couple comparable properties. Next, you have to perform your data analysis, right? Those are, whenever you're trying to estimate the value, the worth of the property, use the highest and best use of the property. Okay, so if it's a vacant land, you can use the land to build a shopping mall, or you can use the land to build a parking lot. Okay, different development plans may lead to different valuation. Use the highest and best use. The same for, let's say, an apartment. You can use apartment for a nonprofit shelter, or you can use it as a high-end residential rental. Well, then use the highest and best possible valuation for that property. So step 5, whenever we're talking about real estate, remember chapter 1, we're talking about the lot and the improvement, the house. We have to separate the land from the house. Why? I'll tell you later. So once you know the value of the land, and then you can try to estimate the value of the property using 3 approaches. Sales comparison approach means you find a couple similar homes that were sold recently. You make some adjustments to make the previous sale more similar to the subject property you're trying to do appraisal for. That's sales comparison. And you have a cost approach. That is, forget about similar sales, or if you cannot find similar sales, how much does it cost you to build an identical home? And lastly, we have income approach. This is more applicable for income generating properties. Let's say it's an apartment, how much possible rent you can collect from this property, or if it's a movie theater, or if it's a shopping mall, how much rent or cash the property can generate. So for each property, we use 3 approaches, but based on the property type, based on the location, one approach may be more applicable for compared to the rest. So you may assign different weighting strategy for each indicated value, right? Let's say for the sales comparison approach, you get $150,000. For the cost approach is $100,000. For the income approach, might be $80,000. Okay, which valuation do you use? You may say, based on the property type, I will give 80% evaluation for the sales comparison, 10% for the cost approach because it's not very applicable, and 10% for the income approach. The total percentage would add to 100, and you can take a weighted average of the 3 approaches indicated value. This is called a reconcile indicated value from 3 approaches. Basically, you're assigning the weights and calculating the weighted average. And then you have to really report the final value. So the next couple slides give you kind of more details for what you do in each step. Let's dive into sales comparison approach directly. So for sales comparison, you have to first identify the elements of comparison and value adjustments. What does that mean? Houses are very unique. There are hundreds or thousands of features each house has. You cannot compare every dimension. This will drive you crazy. What you do is you identify 5 to 10 most important feature of the house. Maybe that's lot, maybe that's number of bedroom, maybe that's number of bathroom, maybe that's a location. So the choice of valuation points is based on your choice, but you have to make the choice based on the property or based on sufficient market research. So let's say for the subject house, you have 3 things you want to consider. Let's say lot, age, or location. Okay, or maybe you want to add more, you have 4. You have square footage. Based on the 4 characteristics, you have to select 3 to 6 comparable homes. Write this down. All the comparable sales has to be sold. I know there's hundreds and thousands of potential listings you can find online. Do not use unsold houses. Why? Because this approach is based on market value, indicated value, market value for similar properties. Okay, so if a home is not sold, we do not know the market value. The listing price, write this down in your notebook. The listing price is an arbitrary number the seller is asking. It has no indication of its market value. So you choose a couple homes that were sold recently. How long is recent? Maybe 6 months, maybe a month, maybe a year, really based on the number of transactions you have. So if some of your comparables were sold, let's say 6 months ago or even a year ago, you have to adjust for the market condition in addition to the difference in housing features. I will give an example. You have to adjust a feature of each comparable, and each comparable would have a suggested value. And then you have to reconcile the adjusted sale prices, and you have to make an indicated sale price for your subject. I will give you more example later in some here. Okay, for example, how do you do that? If you have a subject, the subject doesn't have a patio. The subject has a chimney. That means a fireplace, right? So you have a comparable one that's really similar. And you're like, it's pretty similar based on location, based on size, based on architectural quality, based on design. Maybe the only difference is the chimney or fireplace. Let's say the comparable one has a recent transaction price. That's called a price one, $50,000. I'm just making up the number. You say, okay, comparable one's exactly identical compared to the subject, except it's missing a chimney. Then you have to say, how much does it cost to build a chimney? Then you add the estimated price, the estimated chimney price on top of it. Let's say 1,000, 51. Then your indicated price based on comparable one is $51,000. You have a comparable two. Comparable two has a patio, has no chimney. You have to add the value of chimney to it, subtract the value of a patio from comparable two. You have a second indicated price. There are a couple transactional adjustments you can make, but I think the text will give you very good review or very good examples. This example is really talking about how do you use the recent sales or repeat sales to adjust for market conditions. Okay, so this example is saying you have 3 properties. 1 properties were sold 12 months ago, and sold 12 months ago, and in March 2022, it's sold again. So ABC, both houses were sold twice. Once in the past, once in March 2022. So we have the price, the transaction price, the sold price for each property in today's market. And we know that property A was sold 12 months ago. Property B were sold 18 months ago. Property C were sold 24 months ago. We know the price today, we know the price in the past. We really try to calculate the difference in price divided by the number of months that has passed to calculate the monthly growth per month for that property. So property A indicate that in the past 12 months, every month the property would appreciate by 30%. 0.3%. Property B says 29%, 0.23%, and property C indicate 0.37%. So what's the average growth, monthly growth appreciation for the local market? If 3 properties are pretty much equally representative, you take the sum divided by 3, then you have an average monthly rate of appreciation based on 3 properties transactions. Any question? Any question? So on the exam, I may give you a similar setup and you have to calculate the monthly appreciation. Okay. Okay. A simple example of sale price adjustments. So the key is, I think this is a very good example. It's very thorough, but So the previous example, the key thing about the sales comparison approach is if the comparable is better than the subject, subtract from the comparable. If the comparable is not as good as your subject, you have to add what the comparable doesn't have to the comparable sell price to arrive at the indicated price. Okay, I want to kind of walk through the this example with you. I think this is very good example of the possible exam questions I may ask. So everyone grab your notebook and grab your pen and pencil. We have a subject, and based on the subject, I found 4 comparables. Comparable 1 was sold a year ago. The size is 2,400 square feet, and it's not adjacent to highway, and it's sold for $160,000. And the improvements were nearly identical to subject dwelling in all but size. So, property 2. The property 2 were sold this year. The size is the same, and the property is not adjacent to highway, and the price is sold for is $150,500. And it's pretty similar to the subject otherwise. Property 2 is slightly bigger, and it was sold a year ago. You probably need to adjust for the market condition for that case. And you have the sell price of comparable 3, and everything else are identical. You have comparable 4. Comparable 4 is 2,400. It was sold this year. There's no need for adjusting for market conditions. And you have the sell price, and it's very similar to the subject, is adjacent to the freeway. So based on all the comparables, let's look at, let's try to see what are some things you have to adjust for. One is size, right? The property size. Second is the location to highway, because a lot of people may not like living next to a highway for all the noises and potential traffic hazard. And also, we have the market condition adjustment. Okay, so, okay, back to the subject. You have an improvement. It's a 1-story frame dwelling, number of room, number of bathroom. You don't need to adjust for the number of room bathroom because we're assuming that you selected comparables with the same number of bedroom and the bathroom. And we know that the subject is 2,000 square feet. So for some of the comparables, it's slightly bigger. You have to subtract the additional value of the 400 square feet from all the bigger comparables. And the floor plans items of equipment are typical for this class of property. So your property is adjacent to a high-speed freeway. You have to find out the price discount for locating next to a highway, and you have to find out the value of the additional 400 square footage. And you really have to, because some of your subjects, some of your comparables were sold in the past, we have to adjust for the change in market location. So remember the previous problem. We need to find out how much the market appreciated in the past year. So based on all the comparables, first of all, importantly, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go over the detailed calculation, but you need to know how to do the calculation. So based on comparing the sell price of comparable 1 and 2, 1 was sold a year ago, 2 was sold in this month. We know that the market has decreased by 9,500 over the past year. Okay, so compared to a property sold last year, you have to kind of take some value down if your past sales were a year ago because the market has went down. And based on comparing cell 2 and 4, that's, comparable 2 and 4 are identical except for 2 is not adjacent to highway, 4 is adjacent to highway. Then we know the discount for living next to a highway is 10,200. And based on, it's not showing properly. Okay. So based on cell 1 and 3, we know that additional having 400 square feet less is going to lead to a $10,000 discount based on the square footage value in your market. Okay, we have to make the adjustment. Remember, if your comparable is better, you have to subtract the value of the premium feature from its sales price. Okay, we say CBS. If comparable is better, subtract. So for comparable 1 through 4, we have the sale price. We have the adjustment in market. Comparable 1 and 3 are sold this year. We have to subtract 9,500 because the market has went down. Right? Sorry. Comparable 1 and 3 were sold over a year ago at a better market condition. So we have to subtract to make those two sales more similar to the sales we would make today. Location. All 3 properties, 1 through 3, are not adjacent to highway. We have to subtract the value, for not being adjacent to highway. No change for comparable 4 because it's adjacent to highway, comparable to the subject. Similar adjustment for size, and we add, that's A, B, C. We have the total dollar amount for adjustments. So we subtract this amount from the sales price. We have a final adjusted sale prices for all 3 comparables. If you think all four comparables are equally representative, then you take, the sum and divide it by 2, and then you have the estimated market value. Pay attention. Okay, pay attention, everyone. In this example, it's a coincidence that after the adjustment, every comparable has the same estimated sale price. However, this is a coincidence. Whenever you are working on a problem, if you're looking at 4 comparables, chances are you have different indicated value for each comparable. Let's say maybe for property 1 is 150,000. Property 2 is 160,000. Property 4 is 3, and 180,000. What to do if you have 4 valuation? You can do an equal weighted sum. Adding those values together, divided by 2 to get a market average. Or possibly, if you think that comparable 1 is more comparable to your subject, you can assign 60% for comparable 1 and lesser weight for other comparables. Any question? Any question? If not, I will move on. So this is another example. In those examples, your final adjusted sale prices are different. Then, you just have to take a weighted average as suggested by this example. Question? Okay, next, cost approach. Let me